These Venezuelans are angry at the soaring cost of food and medicine and what they say is a power grab by the president. Protests have been held for 2 months and have frequently turned violent, leaving more than 50 people dead and hundreds injured. And now Goldman Sachs' purchase of Venezuelan government bonds has brought some of that anger to the streets of New York. Some people have described the transaction as a purchase of hunger bonds.
The immorality and greed of the agreement between Goldman Sachs, which was done through intermediaries with the Central Bank of Venezuela, will only help Maduro increase his repression against the Venezuelan people.
Goldman Sachs says it bought bonds in Venezuela's state-owned oil company PDVSA worth $2.8 billion from an intermediary in the open bond market. But it only paid $865 million for them, less than a third of their face value. If Goldman holds on to the bonds until they mature in 2022, and assuming the government doesn't default on them at that time, the bank would make a return of more than 40% a year. If it had paid the full price of the bonds, they would have yielded just 6% annually. Goldman Sachs says it never interacted with the Venezuelan government while making the purchase and denies accusations it's supporting a dictator. In a statement, the bank said, "We recognize that the situation is complex and evolving and that Venezuela is in crisis. We agree that life there has to get better, and we made the investment in part because we believe it will." But that's not how the protesters in New York see it.
And now with this dealing, what Maduro is doing is securing funds to keep repressing the people on the streets, to keep our families in hunger, in misery, and in oppression.
The head of Venezuela's opposition-controlled National Assembly has threatened that a future government that succeeds Maduro may refuse to pay back the debt. The government is desperate for foreign cash to service the repayment on its other debts. Its reserves have dropped from $30 billion before Maduro was elected 4 years ago to about $10 billion today. And the price of oil, its main export and source of revenue, has fallen steeply in recent years, leaving the government's future looking increasingly shaky. Azhar Sukri, TRT World.
Well, we have our editor-at-large, Craig Capitas, in Paris, and from Miami, we have Remi Piet, who is the Senior Director at America's Market Intelligence. Craig, I just want to start with you for a moment, please. Goldman Sachs is trying to put some distance between itself and the Venezuelan government, saying it bought these bonds on the secondary market. Is that a good defense?
Sure, for Goldman Sachs, it's terrific. I mean, they made a great deal here. Goldman Sachs is one of the great human rights organizations, in the world. I'm just a bit surprised that they spent 32 cents on a dollar. I was kind of hoping they'd spend 75 cents on a dollar because 75% of Venezuelans have lost 19 pounds from food shortages since this conflict began. But what a sweet deal.
Remi Piet, if I could ask you about the so-called secondary market that Goldman says it got these bonds from. Is there a decent secondary market to speak of, or is this just a smokescreen?
Well, the official position defended by Goldman Sachs is that they're buying bonds already issued in 2014 from an intermediary financial institution called Dinosaur Securities. And so basically they're making the point that they're not providing money directly to the Venezuelan government. But a basic due diligence study will tell you that Dinosaur Securities is a very small company that never had the financial scope capacity to buy these bonds to start with. Yes, they were issued in 2014, but in truth, they were kept inside the Venezuelan central bank until today because they couldn't find anyone to buy them. And by doing so, Goldman Sachs is indeed providing close to $1 billion of cash flow to the Venezuelan government.
Remi, I beg your pardon, Craig, you said it was a sweet deal, but Goldman is taking a risk here, isn't it?
Goldman's not taking any risk at all here. Goldman Sachs doesn't take risks of this nature. They have just handed the Maduro government $865 million in cash. which is pretty much chump change in the global scale of things. The question is, what is the Maduro government going to do with its $865
Well, hang on,
million?
Craig. No, the question was about risk. Craig, the question was about risk. The economy is in tatters. The whole political establishment is in a mess. Are you telling me there's no risk here?
This is not risk. No, there isn't any risk for Goldman Sachs here. And the reason there's no risk is because Venezuela is one of the richest countries in natural resources on the face of the earth. And when the Maduro government goes the way of the, when it vanishes, which it will, the other folks are going to go in there, they're going to make deals, they're going to be able to get access to Venezuela's resources, and I'll guarantee you they're going to get them at a discount price. I'll guarantee you that Goldman Sachs is going to help cut these deals. You're going to see the trading companies in there. This is a sweet deal for Goldman Sachs, and it really has been made at the expense of the Venezuelan people.
Let me bat this back over to Remi then. Craig's right, isn't he? In fact, Goldman is pretty sure to get its money back, even if it means that the Venezuelan government pays back bondholders before it buys medicine and before it buys food for its own people.
Yeah, actually, 31% is actually a very good investment for Goldman Sachs if you look at it from without any kind of moral perspective. Usually in political risky countries, you have bonds around 50 cents in the dollar, so 31% is a very good deal for Goldman Sachs. The chances for a Venezuelan default is actually very low for two reasons. The first one is that there might be eventually a political transition with the opposition taking over down the road that would actually create new income of money, new source of ways to reimburse Goldman Sachs. The second one, and that was a very good point made by my fellow participant here, is in terms of mining resources, in terms of energy resources, that can be used at any time as collateral for some of those deals. So therefore, the level of risk for Goldman Sachs is very limited.
Okay, quick last question for Craig Capitas.
Absolutely.
Craig, Nicolas Maduro runs a so-called socialist government and is saying that he's in an economic war with Washington, hates Wall Street. What kind of hypocrisy is this?
Oh, well, you know, hypocrisy is a full-time job, and Nicolas Maduro has grabbed this job by the horns. You know, he has in the past, his words, not mine, has called this kind of dealing with the international banks, he calls it savage capitalism. And now he's become the most savage capitalist of all. You know, philanthropy. You know, this is philanthropy of Goldman Sachs. This is the last refuge of a scoundrel. This really smells.
Craig Capitas, Remi Piet, thank you so much.